Oh yeah, here I am in the beautiful South Island of New Zealand in my outdoor gym training under the beautiful snow-capped mountains and training with purpose, passion and enthusiasm. The reason for that, because I have numerous competitions coming up. And yes, I am a sports person, I'm a businessman, and I have a magnificent life. And in all aspects of life, there's going to be competition. So if you're in sport, you have to go to a competition where there are competitors, and you have to train to prepare to be your best, to maximize your chances of winning. And the same applies to business. In business, in any particular industry or profession, there's going to be competitors. And you have to train and you have to prepare your business to maximize its chances of success. And there's no guarantees in life, but the one thing you can control your training, your planning, your preparation to maximize your chances of success. And I guess to me, life is an odds game. It's an odds, and you want to do everything possible to put the odds in your favor. So when I train my fighters, I'm a martial artist, and I've competed in over 30 world championships, and I've built from scratch over 15 businesses. Now, some of those businesses became super successful, multinational, multi-million dollar businesses. Some became okay, and some didn't do great as well as I expected. However, I loved everyone personally, because everyone I did for the right reason. I was passionate about it, I served the purpose, and you don't win all the time. I've competed in over 30 world championships and world cups in martial arts, and I haven't won all the time. I have lots of silver medals and bronze medals, but not all gold medals, and many times I have lots of nothing. I went away empty-handed, but I came back better for the experience. As the great founder of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu beautifully says, in Jiu-Jitsu there's no winning and losing, there's just winning and learning. And life is like that. However, in that preparation, you want to make sure that you do everything possible to be in the best condition you can possibly be from a skill point of view, a preparation point of view, a fitness point of view, whether that be for business, whether that be for sport, or even that be in relationships. You know, nothing just happens. Things happen just means they don't come out of nowhere. There's no such thing as luck. Luck stands for L-U-C-K, labour under continued knowledge. Labour under continued knowledge. So if I have a competition coming up, and if it's a big competition with lots of competitors, and there's some great competition there, then what does that do to my training? That makes me train harder, train better, train smarter to maximize my chances of success. And the same applies with business. If there's lots of competition, then you have to do all the little things that most people are not prepared to maximize your chances of success. And when I train my fighters for competition, overall their career, I say this is the simple philosophy that I want you to take on board. If you train hard enough, and you train long enough, and you train smart enough, you will win enough. You won't win all the time, but you win enough. You won't always win, because sometimes life sends you curveballs, or they send you messages or better competitors to make you better. If I find a better competitor, that inspires me to get better the next time. And life isn't about winning one battle, you know, it's about winning the war. The war's made up of lots of battles, and you're not going to win every single battle. However, you can win the war if you persist. And the only time you fail is when you quit, or worse off, if you don't even start. So whether it be for sport or life, whether it be for business, it's important that it's the long game. It's like the tortoise and the hare. The hare took off quickly and got the start, then got complacent, sat down, but the tortoise, it just kept going and kept going. It wasn't the fastest, but it didn't stop. When the hare was sleeping and snoozing, the tortoise was plunging through. When I went through university and I went through different courses, I've never been the smartest person in the group. But one thing I knew, I was the person who would keep going until I succeed. While you're sleeping, I'll be doing. If you're getting complacent, I'm upping my tempo. and I not have to be the fastest, because life is not a sprint, it's a more of an endurance. I know some of our students asked Rory, how do you run a marathon? Because she's run over 21 marathons in her journey. And I said, how do you run a marathon? And she puts it so beautifully. She says, this is what you do. You get at the starting line, and when the gun goes, you start running. And you just keep running, and you don't stop. And when you cross the finish line, you stop. It's not that hard. So if you just keep going, and you don't have to be the best in the world, you just have to be the best in your world, depending on what you want to build. So look, I've been in the exercise profession since I was 17, which is now going on 40 years. I've been in the fight game, martial arts, since I was 10, which is, I won't even go into how long that is. It's now approaching, 47 years. So I've been doing this a long time. And while other people have quit or phased out or complained and wins, I've just kept going. And in that time frame, I've accumulated a lot of success in business, and I've accumulated a lot of success in sport, having won now 32 gold medal championship medals in Taekwondo and martial arts over that long term, because I just keep showing up, I keep competing, I keep going back, I keep learning, I keep training, and I just don't stop. I don't win all the time, but I win enough along that journey. I don't put pressure on me that I have to win every time. I just put pressure on me to be my best. And there's the great Phil Jackson, the great coach of the Chicago Bulls and the LA Lakers back in the days, and he's won 11 NBL basketball championship rings, and he coached people like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, the legends of the game. He says to his players, I'm not expecting the perfect performance, because there's no such thing as the perfect performance. He says, all I want is the perfect effort. The perfect effort in training, the perfect effort in planning, the perfect effort in preparation, and most of all, the perfect effort in your performance. Leave your heart on the field, that you've done everything you can possibly do to be the best you can be, because you can't control the competition, you can't control the rules, you can't control the referees, you can't control the administrators. All you can control is your performance. And when I coach my team into whether it be sparring or patterns or whatever it might be, I say, this is what I expect from you. I want a gold medal performance. Now that may not win you the gold, but you've given your gold medal performance. Leave your heart on the field, leave your heart in the industry, leave your heart on the mat, in the pool, in the business, leave your heart in it. And a good friend of Rose and I's, Wayne Pearce, is one of the legends of rugby league. He was the Australian Rugby League captain, and New South Wales State of Origin captain when they used to win, and he was also a champion coach. And he basically says, what's most important is we're known as the hardest working player on the field. And he says, what's important is when you come off that field, you've left your heart, your blood, and the guts on the field. Now, you won't always win, but you've done everything possible to win. And the challenge with a lot of people is they feel a little bit insecure, or they have that doubt, or they fear competition. So rather than fearing competition, get excited by competition, because if it wasn't for your competition, you'd have no one to compete with. I have massive respect for everyone who comes into my business profession, or anyone in my sporting profession and I compete against. I have utmost respect, because if you're not there, I'm not here. Because it takes a group to create a competition. It takes a group to create an industry. Now, in my journey, I've been the pioneer in many particular industries that are now flourishing industries and professions. So when I was young, I knew my passion was fitness and exercise and training and sport. So what I basically did is I chose to do what I love, and I knew I wouldn't have to work another day in your life. Now, I was also very good at other things which I wasn't passionate about. I was at school, I was good at economics and accounting, and I could have become an accountant or an economist, and I could have made lots of money, but I wouldn't have been happy because I wasn't passionate about that. What I was passionate about was sport, fitness and training. And that was going back in the early 80s. Now, there wasn't a big flourishing fitness professional industry back then. We didn't have the big mega gyms and the big chains and 24-hour gyms, and there was no such thing as boot camps gyms. And there's a lot of things that exist today that weren't then. Back then, the industry was a little isolated bodybuilding gyms or powerlifting gyms, and it was the start of the aerobics boom. When you with everyone in their leotards and spandex doing aerobics, but people didn't go in the gyms except for the bodybuilders. But I knew that if I did what I love, I'd work out a way to make a living out of it, and most importantly, I'd be happy, irrespective of the bank balance. My bank balance could be low, but my heart balance was high, my passion balance was high, and happiness was the most important thing. However, what I do know is when you do what you're passionate about it for the right purpose, you soon learn how to create profit out of it by building an enterprise. So when I was started working in the exercise profession, I was working as a gym instructor, and my passion was sport and strength training. And at that time I thought, if I could combine sport and strength training and become a strength trainer for sport, a strength and conditioning specialist, then I'd be really living the dream if I could do that for a living. So I started a business at that time called Sports Elite. I just started by how I came up with a name. A friend of mine was a bit of a graphic artist, and they came up, Karen Smith her name was, and hey Karen, if you're watching this, she designed my logo and designed my cards, and I did the screen printing of my own shirts, polo shirts myself, because I couldn't afford professionals, so I self-taught. It was from Karen again of how to get a screen print, and you put the paint and you go over the t-shirts and you make your own logo. So I started off as Sports Elite, and over time, when you're passionate about it, you're throwing it out to your universe for the right reason, people tend to find you. It's quite amazing. They'll find you. Or maybe they were there all the time, but you didn't see them because you weren't living the passion. So it wasn't long before I accumulated a client, one of my first clients called Brett Martin, who happened to be one of the best squash players in the world, the world champion. We just happened to cross paths, and after a bit of a chat, and he sensed my passion, and I said, well, if I can design a strength and conditioning program which is specifically designed for squash, would you be interested? That's going to make you more powerful and stronger and less injuries. And he said, yeah, that's cool. So I started training him, and that one led to two. And I have this philosophy: if you can get one, then you can get 100. If you can get one, you can get 1,000. You just got to keep doing what you did to get one 100 times, and you get better at it, which means it won't take as long. So at that particular time, no one had ever really heard of the profession of a strength and conditioning coach, because most sporting teams at the time, all sporting teams didn't have strength and conditioning coaches. The coach themselves would get the players would run around the field and do some push-ups and do a bit of that, and maybe the individual player would go to the gym and do their own thing, but there was no position as a strength and conditioning coach. That position did not exist, and I was one of the first strength and conditioning coaches in Australia back in 1988, training athletes. And it wasn't long before I was training more and more clients. So there was no, for a better choice of words, industry. I was the first. Now, that's a good thing, means I have no competition. But the not so good thing is that no one knows what I do. So people don't sit there and go, I'm going to call a strength and conditioning coach up and go searching for me, because they don't even know that I exist. They don't even know my position exists, or my expertise or my profession exists. So therefore, even though you're first is sometimes not always the best, because there's no industry, there's no momentum, there's no culture, there's no acceptance. So half of my job was educating people of why they need me. This day and age, you don't have to educate people of why a sporting team needs a strength and conditioning coach. They already know. It's not, will I have a strength and conditioning coach? Now it's, which one? Back then is, what's the strength and conditioning coach? Why would I pay money for you? I don't need you. I've gotten up to where I am now without you. So I always remember a conversation at the start. I had to promote myself, and I didn't have to promote myself. I had to promote the industry. I had to promote a profession. So I set up this seminar, and I won't go into detail, but I approached and attracted to me a number of experts in established professions within the sports medicine, sports support area. I got a sports physiotherapist, a guy called Michael Payoff. These were all elite guys. They were working with state of origin, national sporting teams, international teams. I attracted Rhonda Anderson, who was a dietitian for many national sporting teams, because sports dietitian was accepted then. Sports physiotherapy was accepted then. I got Dr. Paul Armstrong, who was a sports physician. That was an accepted thing then. Everyone knew what they did. I got Dr. Ian Liner, who was a sports psychologist. That was an established profession, so they knew what he did. And I got a guy called David Keating, who was the manager of the Australian Institute of Sport. And everyone knew that, hey, sports managers, you need that. And then I was the sports strength and conditioning coach, no one knew what I did, but they knew what all the other panel did. So there's 5 of them, 1 of me, and there's 6 of us. And I promoted this seminar series called the Peak Performance in Sports Seminar Series, and I promoted it to a big evening. I invited coaches and sports people and all of that stuff, put it into a 5-star hotel. I got the panel, we all got up there and did our pitch to inform and educate and inspire and motivate people. And everyone knew what they did, but no one knew what I did. But I knew if I had to share what I did, I need to have the associated credibility from everyone else around me. Now, these experts knew the benefit of what I did because they were fairly educated type people, and they knew about strength and conditioning and the importance of it because they were trained in that particular field. So I did the seminar, ended up getting hundreds of people who attended, and before you know it, my career was launched, basically on the coattails of the other five. So it was a win-win situation. They got more clients from it, I got more clients from it, they started referring their clients to me, and before you know it, I'm training the Olympics, the Australian Olympic kayak team for the Australian Institute of Sport, and all of a sudden, before you know, I'm training national sporting teams. But it didn't just happen, it happened just. I had to create that, being, I guess, one of the first people in the field, and I had to basically build the field. Being one of the first, you have to build the field, build the reputation, build the culture, and that is hard work because you don't necessarily, but enjoyable work, because you don't get a direct return. You have to build the field for people to come to it to see what you do, and then once it's built, then everyone else jumps on and benefits from your hard labour. So sometimes it's not always the best to be first. However, if you wait for someone else to do it, then you'll probably be waiting too long and you never actually do it. And even my puppy dogs, who are wrestling in the background, are agreeing with me. They're having a fun time out here in the sunshine. But in that time, I knew I needed competition. I needed other strength and conditioning coaches to create an industry, a profession, so we can all benefit. We need to create competition, because without competition, there's no event. You're just sitting in a paddock by yourself with no one to compete with. So whether it be in business or sport, you need competition. And if you're the first, there's no competition. So you have to, in a way, promote other people to come in to compete with you. Otherwise, I'll be on the mat fighting with no one in front of me. I'll be in business with no one in front of me to compete with, but then no one will want to watch it because no one knows what we do anyway. So in that journey, at the start, I had to educate other people and sporting teams. I remember I was working with, I ended up working with the Australian baseball team, but I remember having a conversation with the CEO, and we're chatting. He says, "What do we need you for?" Because he'd never really heard a strength and conditioning coach back in those days. So I sat down for about 1 hour taking him through why his team needed me to maximise their performance, get them strong, fit, powerful, and reduce their chances of injury to have longevity. And I basically had to not sell them my services, but actually sell him the benefits of this new flourishing industry. Nowadays, every significant sporting teams have a full-time strength and conditioning coach. Back then, there was none. But over time, that grew. And the same applied with later on, not many years later, after that, I expanded my services when I was training national sporting teams and lots of international athletes. I took my service to the general public through a term which is commonly known now as personal training. But back then, no one knew what a personal trainer was. People thought, what's a personal trainer? If they did know, it was one of those people that Hollywood movie stars got to train them for a movie. But outside that, why do you need to pay for a personal trainer? I can go down to the gym myself. So when I decided to take my services as personal training, my first business was called Gold Coast Personal Trainers. My sports and conditioning business was called Sports Elite. Again, the same thing applied. I I was one of the first, so I had to almost educate the population of why they need a personal trainer. Now, I don't have to educate the population now, some, going on 40 years later, because everyone knows the benefits of a personal trainer. They just have to decide which one are they going to pick based on whether they're the best or whether they're the personality, whatever it might be. But back then, they said, personal training, well, what do you do? What does personal trainers do? And why would I pay you money to do that? Which again, now you're in the start of being first, yes, means I have no competition, but I've got no competition with an industry that doesn't exist. Now I have to create the industry myself and try to bring on board competition, because the more people speaking about it, the more people doing it, the more acceptable it becomes. I guess you look at some of the great pioneers in the world from a business, a great company, whether you like their product or not, is Starbucks. Starbucks is the most successful coffee chain or coffee cafes throughout the world. They have hundreds of thousands of them around the world. We all know who they are, but they started with the owner, Howard Schwartz, who had to create an industry, a coffee drinking population, because even in my going on 60 years of life, if you said to me back in the early 80s and you said, hey, Kman, let's go for a coffee, I would look at you and say, what are you talking about, go for a coffee? That would be like me saying to you today, hey, let's go for a carrot. You just, what does that mean? Go for a carrot. Well, the same applies if I say to you now, let's go for a coffee. Well, that has two meanings. A, let's go and have a coffee, but more importantly, let's go and connect and chat. It means let's catch up over a coffee. But that culture was created by Howard Schwartz and Starbucks. They created the coffee culture and it expanded where it was acceptable now not just to go and have a coffee outside, lattes and all the different variations. In my days, it's just one coffee. It was called International Roast Instant Coffee. But now there's so much. And you had to create this culture that not only that, the people were quite happy to pay, $5, $6, $7 for a coffee. And people go, that's crazy. I remember my old man, to do a side note, he picked me up from the airport, and this is going back in the really early 90s. And he picked me up from the airport, and I was waiting. He went and had a cappuccino. And my old man's, he went through the war, and he's seen many phases in the world. And then when he picked me up, I says, hey, go on, Dad. He says, oh, you wouldn't bloody believe it. You wouldn't believe it. I said, what's that? He says, I had a cappuccino. I was waiting for you. I said, yes. He says, $2.50 they charged me. Would you believe that? $2.50. Unbelievable, because he comes to the coach, you have coffee at home. The only time you have coffee at home is in the morning, instant coffee, and maybe on a special occasion, you may have a percolated coffee at a dinner party or something like that. But outside that, you didn't go out and buy coffee in a cafe. They didn't exist. You didn't buy coffee in a snack store, because they didn't exist. But now they were existing, so he tried it out. And then he says, $2.50, that's 50 cents a sip. Unbelievable. So he didn't recognise or didn't accept or value the value of the coffee. What's really interesting, within 6 months, he was the coffee king of the Gold Coast. He knew where all the great coffees were because he bought into the culture. That culture was pioneered by Starbucks. And now then the industry has grown, and in that time, not only has the industry grown and other competitors come into the industry to grow, but Starbucks have grown, because now it's a bigger pie. It's not just a little tiny pie and you're the only person eating it. You're home, I'm the only person here, I've got no competition, isn't that great? But the pie is so small. However, if you get more people involved to build a bigger pie, everybody benefits. And it's easy to sell a bigger pie than a small pie that no one knows about. It's easy to sell a bigger pie that everyone knows about than a small pie that no one knows about. It's easy to be part of a big industry where it's accepted for your services. You just have to position yourself in your target market in that pie, in those services, rather than having to build the pie, because everyone's building the pie. Everyone's building the industry to benefit everybody. So when I was a personal trainer, I ended up I was one of the first personal trainers in Australia back in the late 80s, and I was one of the first people to have a personal training studio. Studios didn't exist back then. You went to the gym. So I created a little studio in the Rang on the Gold Coast, and I started it, and people would say, why would you go to a studio with a small little studio when I can go to a big gym? And people didn't understand, because that culture hadn't developed. So I was at the start of planting that seed of that culture where you can come to a studio, it's private, it's personable, is customized, it's not noisy, there's not lots of mirrors, there's not a lot of big gym junkies or female junkies looking at you, making you feel intimidated. It's private, and there's a big market for that, but people didn't realize. There was no market back then, but there was a potential big market. So for a potential big market to be created, someone has to plant the first seed, because the first seed then invite other people to plant a seed, and before you know it, you have a forest. And when there's a forest, there's plenty of wood to go around for everybody. But if you're protective and not letting other people plant the seed because you're insecure about competition, you end up with one tree. But if you have a forest, you're going to have a choice of trees for your services. So at the start, competition is good to encourage competition, to encourage people to come in to help build collectively a industry, for choice of better words. I like to call it a profession. So when I started studios, then that started. Now these days, one of my colleagues who I've been involved in mentoring him for well over 20 years, called Vision Personal Trainer, owned by Andrew Simmons. He now has over 60 personal training studios, turning over $60 million. And there's studios everywhere. There's Pilates studios, and there's Zumba studios, and there's all sorts of private studios. And that brings joy to me, because I was a part of starting that back in the late 80s and early 90s. But someone has to start it. And when that grows, everybody benefits. So rather than being threatened by competition, encourage competition. You know that if you go into a city, there tends to be a restaurant district. So where are the restaurants? You go to the restaurant district, there's a street, and there's Italian, and there's Indian, and there's Thai, and there's Mediterranean, and there's a whole list, all these restaurants, and that becomes a buzz. I'm in the restaurant, buzz, and there's people out, fresco dining, and you're walking around, and this time you have Thai, and next time you may go and have Italian, and what you're doing is creating a buzz and a culture of going out for dinner, a culture of going out for coffee, a culture of people wanting a personal trainer, knowing what it is. Everyone wants a personal trainer. I just have to work out how and who am I going to pick, rather than what is personal training. Because you don't want to be a restaurant, unless you're massively unique with a huge following, to be isolated and have no competition, because then you're just that little restaurant in the suburbs that no one knows about, versus building a district like the food court, or a district. This is the district, the CBD district, or the restaurant district. And they do the same with nightclubs too. You go and down the Gold Coast cities, and where's the nightclub district? Or you go down to King's Cross, or you go down there, and that's where all the clubs, you got a choice of clubs, and you go back and forth, and the whole thing just builds a snowball effect of momentum of culture and acceptance and need and want, and you all benefit each other rather than competing with those. So if you think of them as competition, then you're going to be insecure. And if you're insecure, you start to do emotional things based on your insecurity, and you start to make bad decisions. But if you see them as ways to get better, if there's lots of competitors in my martial art tournament, and I get insecure, I'm guaranteed to lose. If I get excited to say, these people are going to make me better, this person's really good at kicking, this person's good at punching, I ought to be aware of that, I'll get better at punching, I've got to move to the left, move to the right, and I'm going to, if I win or lose, because life isn't about one bout. Life is just a continuation of bouts, and you can reset the bout anytime you want. Every day is the first day of your business. Every day is the first day of your relationship. Every day is the first day of your training. Every day is the first day of your next competition. So, I lose one competition, I'll get better for the next. And before you know it, I start winning, and I win enough to create the life that I want to live, doing what I love, that's really valuable to me, that fulfills my values and my purpose. So when there's competition, without competition you don't get better, because competition creates pressure. It creates and I call it pressure testing. I put a little post up not recently of martial arts, and I said, the one great thing about competition, it gives you the opportunity to pressure test your fight skills to determine what works and what doesn't work. Because a lot of people train martial arts, but they don't compete martial arts. And competition is a real important component of testing your skills, testing your mind and your body under pressure to see how you handle it. Because it's great to say, yes, I'm a lethal weapon, but it hasn't ever really been tested in a pressure situation, no matter what the rules are. Any pressure where there's an outcome of winning and losing, but most importantly, winning and learning. The next step when I was a personal trainer, I got involved in education, training other people to become fitness instructors. And I I started the Sports Elite Fitness Center training program back in 1989, where I was training people to become gym instructors. And when the personal training profession started to take off, and it was just, we were still infancy stage, it was myself and a handful of others around the country doing it. I said, well, if I want to do it, and I'm benefiting from it, because I was a full-time trainer at that time, I was training 40 clients a week, charging $50 a session, so I was earning about $2,000 a week, $100,000 a year, back in the 80s and early 90s, excuse me, which is, yeah, it's a good amount of coin even in this day and age. And I thought, if I can do that, why don't I teach other people to do it? So I developed a course called the Personal Training Certificate, and it was the very first personal training certificate that I know of that was run in Australia in the very, very early 90s. I presented on personal training at the National International Conference in Fitness in Australia. I was the first person ever to present on strength training in 1988. No, 1988, I was the first person to present on strength training, sports conditioning training in 1988 in the National Fitness Conference. And it was 1991 I was the first person to present on personal training, because a lot of people haven't heard of it, and if they had heard of it, it was more through, hey, the Hollywood movie stars, not as a respected profession where you can actually create a great living and a career and a business out of it. And then soon after that, I put together a personal training certificate, and it wasn't long before other educational providers in Australia asked me to come and help them set up their first one. So I set up the first personal training certificate in New South Wales and also Tasmania, because I share them. They obviously paid me to do that, but I thought if I can get them doing it and I can get them presenting trainers, and then it's going to be more trees in the forest, and the forest is going to grow, and before you know it, I'll stop having to plant the seeds myself, because the trees themselves will reproduce. You know, their pines or the seeds will come off and they'll grow, and it will become self-growth. It will grow itself without me having to do all the hard labor. The more I get involved, you know, together each achieves more, like team. You got to create a team in the profession. Now, if you're insecure with competition in a team, then you're going to go solo, and that's a hard way to do it, because you never gain any momentum. And I always remember asked by one of my trainers who's working for me, because I built my business up where I had 6 trainers working for me. We're doing, you know, just under 200 sessions a week. We're turning over close to $500,000 a year in a little personal training studio. It wasn't very big, in Miami on the Gold Coast above the Miami medical practice. And that's a $500,000 turnover back in the early 90s. And one of my trainers, Graham, he said, you know, Kman, you're running all these courses to train other trainers. So that doesn't make any sense, because aren't you training people to be your competitors? If you train people to be successful personal trainers, there's going to be more personal trainers out there competing against you. I said, yeah, that's a good look at it from an insecurity point of view. However, what I'm doing is I'm creating more personal trainers to get more clients, to build the culture in this industry where more, promoting more, then the pie just gets bigger and bigger, and we all benefit. And all you have to decide is where in that pie of success do you want to position your business. It's no longer, will my business succeed? It's now, where in the pie of success do I want to position my business? Whether I'm specializing in a particular target market, whether it be training children or adults or sports people or rehabilitation, whether it be a studio, a mobile trainer, or an online trainer these days, that's the whole profession has grown. And I believe that I was helping in building the profession. Yes, I was getting paid to do that, but I needed competitors to come in to make me better. So 2 things: it grows the profession for everyone to benefit. The second thing is that it actually makes you better, because you only get better with competition. Yeah, so if there's no competition, you're not going to get better. And if there's competition, you learn from other people's experiences. I know as a fighter, I studied lots of other fighters who have different styles and they learn different things, and I take the best of them to apply into me. And from a business point of view, if there are other successful businesses in this pie of success, I can learn from them, because I'm only going to know what I know, but I can learn from what they know, which they've learnt from their own experiences. So I can actually take the best and study the best of all the other competitors, put it into me, and that's going to make me better in my business or in my sport or in my life, because you can't learn from others if there's no others. You can't learn from other competitors if there's no other competitors, because other people are going to do it better than you in different ways, and you can learn that way. So it becomes this big library of learning tools and learning successes and learning resources from other people. The other thing is, if there's a lot of people in your profession, then it's easier to stand out, because you can't stand out if there's nothing to stand out from. It's easy to stand out from a crowd if there's a crowd, but you can't stand out from a crowd if there's no crowd. So a lot of trainers say, oh look, there's so many trainers out there, you know, so competitive. That's a good thing. If there's a lot of sheep in this paddock and there are heaps of sheep, then everyone knows, look at all the sheep. So that's the industry, that's the profession, there's lots of sheep. So if you want to stand out from the sheep, be not the white sheep, be the red sheep. And now you really stand out. It's very easy to stand out when everyone else is average. And when you find in every profession, every industry, there's a lot of average. A lot of people will do just enough. They'll start their business, they'll start their career, they'll do their sport, and they'll be average. And that's how they are, and that's how they like it, or whatever it might be. But when everyone else is average, it's very easy to be amazing, because you just got to do what they're not prepared to do. And a lot of those things are just the little things. I remember one of my business colleagues, Dougie his name is, and he has a very successful international business. He's a little short guy, and his message is all you need to do is just stand a little bit taller than everybody else. If you stand a little bit taller than everybody else, first of all, everyone can see you because you're the little bit taller, and most importantly, you can see above everyone. But if you're the same height as everyone, you're like in a flock of sheep, all you're seeing is the next sheep's bottom. So you just got to be, you don't have to be massively better, you just got to be a little bit better across the board, and that will make a massive difference. So rather than being insecure that there's so many other trainers out there, so many other businesses out there, think of it this: if there's many out there, that means that's going to make me better, because I've got many other people to learn from. And most importantly, if there's many average out there, then it's going to make me easier to stand out, because I just got to do what they're not prepared to do to make myself stand out for the right reason. It's easy to stand out in a flock of white sheep when you're pink. It's easy to stand out in the low-lying grass if you're just a little bit taller than you. You can probably see out here, there's all this grass, and you can probably see every now and again there's that little twig that sticks up, little black twig. That black twig. So when I look out here, I don't really see all the average grass, which is sort of around about the same height. What stands out is those little black twigs. Those little black twigs, and I go, oh my gosh, look at that. They stand out because they're taller. Than they're not a lot of them, but they grow a little bit taller. And what I notice in the mornings here, particularly in the mornings, is thousands and thousands and thousands of birds come through. And which blade of grass do they land on? Yes, they all go and land on the little black twigs. So see the black twigs with the bird landing on top, because it's the twig that stood out to the bird. And the bird's going to stand on the twig. It's going to stand on the highest twig. It doesn't have to be 50 meters high. It just has to be higher than the average competitor. And most competitors will be average. So yes, it is hard if you're an average business with average competitors. Because if you're average, then the only way you have to compete on is cost, means you have to be cheaper. But if you're better, then you don't compete on cost. So embrace competition, promote competition, because without that competition you have no one to compete with, no reason to get better, and no way to stand out. And if you do that, then you're going to become successful no matter how many competitors there are, because you'll be the twig amongst the grass. See you in the next Kman, because I have to get back to training, put myself under pressure in training so I don't break in competition. So in competition, I'm not the coal, I'm the diamond, because pressure creates diamonds.